In this video, we're going to be looking at an art for sale normalization exercise. So we had looked up, this was years ago when I made up this exercise, some works of art by Thomas Hart Benton, and I was on the askart.com site. And so I found sort of different works that were for sale at different galleries. And then you can also find a description of the artist Thomas Hart Benton, including some of the styles that he's associated with. Okay, so let's start the normal start of a normalization exercise. First of all, I just have up here Thomas Hart Benton, and then down here it's blank because it's still Thomas Hart Benton. And so the first step to uh, move from unnormalized to first normal form is to flatten. And so anything that is multi-valued, so a work of art is multi-valued because both of these works of art are by Thomas Hart Benton. And then also we have a multi-valued styles attribute where he's saying that this artist has done murals and genre and figures and graphics. And so that would also have to be flattened. And this could be confusing in the flattening. Um, do the styles belong to the work of art or do they belong to the artist? But you can see in the way this data is represented at the top in the beginning that because the styles are not repeated in the for the different work, you can see that the styles in this case are belong to the artist. So let's just state my assumption. So one is going to be that styles belong to artist, not work. Um, that's just the way the data is here. That's not necessarily what you might come up with in real life. So you could say Picasso had these many styles, or you could say Picasso did this work and it's in this style. So that you could associate the style with the work, or you could associate the style with the artist. The way the data is here, it seems to be associated with the artist. So that's what we're going to go with. But it might make sense to do it a different way. Okay. And then what else? What other assumptions might we have? Um, so we have galleries. So sometimes it's useful to sort of think a little bit along the ER modeling, the entity relationship modeling thing. So we definitely have works of art and galleries and an artist, and maybe styles might end up to be an entity as well. Um, okay. Um, and numbering is important. So we have to sort of talk a little bit about a work of art and is it a completely unique thing or not. So one thing right now we have the work identified by a title, and the title is probably not unique. There are a lot of things that might be untitled or nude study or something like that. Um, this one up here says mural study for the social history of Indiana. We probably did many studies for that mural. So uh, the title is not unique, but is the work. And then so now we're saying what kind of work? Typically, we would think of a painting, a drawing as a unique thing touched by the um, artist, but then we could also come down to start talking about prints where there are many, an artist sort of makes like an etching plate or something like that, and many works are made from that. Then a work of art may not be unique, but in some of those situations, the um, those prints are sometimes numbered. And so when we're identifying the work, if we're identifying it down to the level of this was like 23 out of 50, so we did 50 altogether, and this was the 23rd. And if we assign works IDs and we decide 24 out of 50 a different ID, then they would be unique. So I'm going to, and again, I'm sort of stating my assumptions. So I'm going to say that the works that we're talking about here are unique, and I'm going to assign them an ID. So we're going to say artworks are unique, and then we're going to assign them an ID. So that we're got it, it's not shown up here, but we want to get away from this problem of titles. Okay. So what else? There are a number of assumptions we have to work through here. So we have, okay, now we know that the artwork is unique, or at least we're going to assume it's unique. So if we're having prints, we're going to assume that they're numbered or somehow identifiable to and each one assigned an ID. Okay, now we need eventually we're going to talk about relationships. Um, so an artist creates a work, and we need that sort of relationship that's going to come up uh, sort of right away. Well, let's move back a little bit towards normalization and then show that, and then come back up to these assumptions as they're arising. So one of the like rules of thumb of normalization is that anything repeated has to appear. So the work of art is repeated. So that's going to have to appear here. So just going to say work ID, artwork ID, or work ID. Let's say artwork. Okay. And then we also see that the styles, that's a multi-valued field. So there's going to have to be some kind of a style ID. Let's call it let's call it artist style. Um, and give it an ID. No, I'm just going to say style. Okay. So there's a style ID and artwork ID because they were multi-valued, and multi-valued things in a flattened field that we're going to need them. Because I need a primary key has to be able to pick out one and only one record. So if anything was repeated and then we're flattening it by making it to many records, then that one difference has got to appear there. So the work was repeated, must be in the flattened primary key. Style was repeated, must appear in the flattened thing. And now we're going to get over to gallery and to artist. So the question is this enough? Is artwork style ID enough? And so now we're back up into our assumption. Does the artwork determine for us the artist? If I tell you an artwork, not the title of a work, but sort of here is the work, I've ID'd it, can we then look up? And I'm not asking you to be able to identify the artist looking at the work. I'm saying, can you look it up in our database? So that just comes down to the question, is the work of art made by one artist, or is it made by many artists? So we know that an artist uh, creates many works, but a work is created by, and now we have to know if we are allowing more than one artist to make a work. Are we going to assume that it is a, just one artist creating this work or not. So like there's a British team, sort of like a postmodernist British team where they always make art as in pairs. So do we want to treat them? Do we always want to treat them as sort of a team, as one artist, or have they made individual works? Uh, do we want to accommodate something like that in our database? That is a difficulty that we know that strictly speaking, a work can possibly be created by more than one artist. But if it's, I don't know, rare enough, because that makes the sort of querying of the database harder, it will introduce more tables. So you're playing against like if it's very rare, you might handle it at some other different way. Um, so I'm going to go with one here, but it is an assumption. So we're writing it down. We're making it explicit as an assumption. So that would tell us that artwork ID would tell us the artist, and then I don't need it in the primary key. If we made the many here, we did the many here, then it would not determine the artist, and we would need the artist ID down here. What about gallery? So we have artwork and style. What about gallery? Okay, so now we're down to this uniqueness of the work idea again. Um, that's one. Like if it's a unique work of art, it can only be in one gallery. But there's another question of are we just worried about what's available for sale right now? Are we doing sort of a pure, live transaction database, or are we going to keep a history? If we're going to keep a history, now we don't have any dates up here to say, like it was in this gallery, available in this gallery from this date to that date. Or that it was sold or anything like that. So we just have to imagine what are we keeping. So we could imagine we were keeping a history of works available in galleries, and then we would have to say that the work might have gone through different galleries, um, and then it would be a many to many relationship. A gallery has many works of art. A work of art may have been in many galleries. If we're talking about just sort of current, like, what's available right now, we're not interested in history. We just want to know people are looking for art. And, if the gallery sold it on, it's not available at that gallery, we don't care. So it depends whether we're tracking history or not. Um, let's keep it as simple as we can. And let's say we're not tracking history. And then we'll say a gallery uh, has many works. A work is available, that's what we'll say, at one gallery. Okay. So then again, the work is telling us the gallery idea. This work, if I can identify the work, I know what gallery it's currently available in. End of story. Okay. But all those assumptions are here in this primary key. If the artwork could be made by more than one artist, I'd need artist ID. If the artwork were available, if we were tracking history and it were available in more than one gallery, the gallery ID would need to be here. So we're saying the simpler choice for two of these things. The artist creates many works, but the work is by one artist. The gallery has many works, but the work is available at one gallery. So we've taken out, with those assumptions, artist ID and gallery ID from the primary key for the flattened table. Are there candidate keys? Is there another way to uh, identify this? So what do I have identified here? The work and the style. Now, nothing's going to connect me to style. Um, is there some other way of getting into the getting at the work of art? Um, so I made up an ID. I made up an ID because the titles might not be unique, but then if you add medium in size and availability at a gallery, would that, could that be unique enough? And I'm just going to say no, no. So um, I'm not coming up with any good candidate keys here. Um, Now we start to look at functional dependencies. So these two things combined, artwork and style ID, are going to determine everything. But what are sort of smaller things, either one of these individual or something else that determines things? So we start looking up here. Well, the artist ID is going to give us, I use an arrow for that. Artist ID is going to give us what all did I have? Artist first name, last, first name, middle name, last name, death, birth, and state. All that. So first name, last name, birth, death, date, okay. Artist info determined by the artist ID. That makes sense. Did I put down state? I did put down state, birth, date, first name, last name. I missed middle name. Okay. So that was all determined by the artist ID. If I identify the artist, I have that. The styles are the styles. They're going to be identified by the styles ID. The work for sale is the work for sale. It's going to be identified by the work ID. But we have more information about the work. So the work ID, the artwork ID, is going to determine the artwork title, the medium, the size. Did I have any other artwork things? Medium size. Okay. Now, we said that the work of art determines the artist. I'm going to separate these, but it's um, also determined. Uh, so I'm just going to put down the artist ID here. And then everything else that was determined by the artist ID is determined. So this is going to be a good um, transitive for us. And so the artwork ID sort of gave us directly the artwork title, the medium, the size. The artwork ID gave us the artist ID, which then gave us the first name, middle name, last name, birthday, state. Um, what else did artwork give us? We assumed that it was a unique work that was only in one gallery. So we'll say that the artwork is going to determine for us a gallery ID. And then the gallery ID is going to determine what the gallery name, street, city, zip. Okay, phone. All right. So gallery name and the street, city, state, zip, phone. And then some people will say, like, oh, well, the phone number is unique, so it will tell us the gallery, so we could like turn that around. And that's true, but I will leave it. Um, so we have our basic, I would say, functional dependencies. Some of them can be turned around. If I knew all this about the first name, the middle name, the last name, the birth date, and death date. So if I knew the first name and last name and birth and date, birth and death, I could probably get the artist ID. And if I knew the phone or I knew the street, city, state, I could probably turn it around and get the gallery name. And if I know the zip, I could probably get the state. So there are lots of little things here. Um, let's just say others to just um, we could probably say F name, L name, case two artists, and birth date. That's probably pretty unique, and that would determine the artist ID. That's probably enough unique stuff to tell us the artist ID and the death date and the state. These were American artists that I was looking at, so that's why state and not region or some other thing or country. Um, and what else do we say? Zip might tell us state, might tell us city, depending on if it's the 5-digit or the 9-digit. The phone might tell us the gallery ID. So there are things here that I'm probably not going to put into my decomposition, but there are things to possibly consider. Okay, they are dependencies. Now let's look at partial dependencies. So partial means, does it depend on style? Nothing depended on style, but like the name of the style. But the artwork ID, so all these artwork things, those were all partials. Artwork ID was part of our primary key. So those are all partials. The artwork determining the title, the meaning, the size. The artwork determining the artist ID, that's a partial, but it's also then going to be next. In our next list, it's going to be even more interesting, transitive. So these are the transitives that A determines B, determines C. So the artwork determines the artist ID, determines all this information. The artwork determines the gallery, determines all this information. And then we're ready to decompose. So I'm going to take all the things and also remember that I introduced an artwork ID and so on. I'm going to grab all these things to remind myself what was there so I don't miss anything. So I'm making this big long list of fields that I had. Why did I make so many fields? And birth and death and state. And then we will start to pull everything out. So as we go to second normal form and pull out our partials, go to third normal form and pull out our transitives, we are going to, and I introduced a work ID. I sort of made up a style ID. I had already made up an artist ID. I think I renamed this title. I introduced a gallery ID. Call it gal ID to save a little space. And then there was the gallery name and the street and the city and the zip and too many things. All right, here we go. So there were all these things, and I'm just going to say that this was my original table. Okay, and what does normal forms tell us to do? It tells us to pull out artwork and the things that depend on it. So that was the art, that was the work ID. And then all those things, the work, the medium, the size, they're getting pulled out. Keep the work ID up there for relationships, but everything that depended on it gets pulled out. So the ID gets pulled out, but stays, whereas the other things get pulled out and they're gone from the original. All right. Now I'm breaking these up because one of them, the artwork, was just uh, it was just there. So let me put in artist ID and gallery ID here at that first level. That was at the first level, artist ID and gallery ID. But at the transitive level, artist and gallery get pulled out. So that's going to be the artist ID. And that's going to pull out first name, last name, birth, date, state. So we keep pulling things out of our original. That's the idea there. And then there's going to be gallery. That's going to be the start off with the gallery ID. And then pull out all the gallery stuff, the gallery name, city, state, phone. Okay. And what was left? This original table had, there was an artwork and it had a relationship to the gallery, which is now in the artwork. And the artwork, so the relationship between work and gallery is there. The relationship between the work and the artist was there. So I'm feeling comfortable pulling them completely out. You've got to do your relationships. And so uh, those we decided we were going to make them one to many relationships. And so the relationship is down here, that the work was related to the artist, told us uniquely the artist, told us uniquely the gallery. So now we have left up in that original one, the artist and the styles. There's a connection between an artist and a style. So let's pull out styles. So to pull out a style with the style ID and like a style name, style description. And sometimes I invent fields along the way that weren't there. IDs, that's a standard normal thing, but okay. So now this original table, I'm pulling out the styles, just keeping the ID. So now this original, I'm going to rename it as the artist style, a bridge table between the artist and a style. And let's go back up to our assumptions and sort of working through the multiplicity of these relationships. And we will say that an artist may work in many styles. That was clear from the data. That's not an assumption. I put it under assumption. I shouldn't put it under assumption. Let's just say not an assumption. It was clearly explicit in the data that Thomas Hart Benton worked in all of these styles. An artist's work may work in many styles, and a style, I don't know, may be exhibited or worked in, or I don't know, may be exhibited by many artists. It's clear that Thomas Hart Benton is not the only person who made murals or did graphics. Um, so these are assumptions about what we meant by a work of art and are we keeping history. Those are assumptions about the databases and what we're tracking and what we would do. Is it Gilbert and George or somebody in George is? So we're going to assume it's a unique artist, that the works are unique, and we're not if we're dealing with prints, they're numbered, and different numbered prints have different IDs. So those were a number of real sort of assumptions we're making. This is of a similar nature in that we're figuring out the multiplicity of the relationship, but it's not an assumption. It's pretty explicit in the data. So that original table became the sort of artist style bridge table. We pulled out style, we pulled out gallery, we pulled out artists, we pulled out artwork. Artwork, because of our decisions, uniquely told us the artist, uniquely told us the gallery. So that relationship, you have to imagine sort of, maybe drawing an ER diagram and saying, is anything just floating out there? If anything's floating out there, we probably made a mistake. But everything seems to be connected somehow. The artwork connects the artist and the gallery. The artist style connects the artist to the style. I think we have all of our relationships intact. Okay, that's what I wanted to show you on this one. Thanks for your attention.